The sky over the Pacific was the kind of blue that made you forget the world had edges. Commercial Flight 447 cut through it like a needle through silk, 37,000 feet above an ocean that stretched to every horizon. Inside the cockpit, Captain Alexis Ghost Rourke ran her fingers along the yoke with the kind of casual precision that came from 10,000 hours in the air. Her co-pilot, a young man named Mitchell who still had that academy shine in his eyes, was running through the descent checklist when the first warning light blinked red. "Engine 2 pressure drop," Mitchell said, his voice tight. Ghost's eyes moved across the instruments. The light blinked again, then held steady. "Confirmed, running diagnostics." But before her fingers could reach the panel, the aircraft shuddered. Not the gentle turbulence of rough air, but something deeper, something wrong in the bones of the machine. Mitchell's hand went white on his armrest. Ghost felt it too, the slight yaw to starboard, the way the nose wanted to drift. Then the radio crackled with a voice that didn't belong to air traffic control. "Commercial Flight 447, this is Reaper 11. You are off course and entering restricted airspace. Acknowledge immediately." Mitchell's eyes went wide. Ghost keyed the mic. "Reaper 11, this is 447. We have a mechanical issue. Requesting immediate clearance to maintain heading until we can correct." Silence. Then, "Negative 447. You are 3 minutes from active military exercise zone. Multiple interceptors airborne. Advise you alter course immediately." Ghost looked at the navigation display. They were drifting, slowly but steadily, toward a section of ocean marked with red hatching. She pulled back on the yoke, testing the response. The aircraft slugged to port, overcorrected. Engine 2 was losing power and with it, hydraulic pressure. The flight management system was compensating, but barely. "Mitchell, give me manual trim." His hands moved fast, but she could see the fear creeping in. Behind them, 185 passengers were drinking coffee, watching movies, sleeping. They had no idea that the sky had just become a battleground, that their pilot was fighting a machine that no longer wanted to obey, that somewhere out there, fighters were already turning toward them with weapons hot and fingers on triggers. Ghost had been here before. Not in this cockpit, not with this call sign, but in another life when the sky was full of threats and every decision was measured in seconds. She'd earned the name Ghost in a place where mistakes didn't get second chances, where hesitation meant death. The Air Force had been her home for 12 years before she'd walked away, trading the stick of an F-16 for the yoke of a passenger jet. Some called it a step down. She called it peace. But peace, it seemed, had a short memory. The radio crackled again, and this time the voice was different. Calmer, colder. 447, be advised. You have 2 F-22 Raptors closing from your 6 o'clock. They will escort you out of restricted space. Do not deviate. Do not attempt evasive maneuvers. Acknowledge. Ghost felt Mitchell's eyes on her. "They're serious," he said. "They're always serious." She keyed the mic. "Reaper 11 acknowledged. We are experiencing hydraulic failure. Maneuverability is compromised. Request vector for emergency descent." A pause, then stand by. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time. Engine 2 sputtered and the cabin pressure alarm began its shrill whine. Ghost's hands moved without thought, years of training compressed into muscle memory. She pulled the oxygen mask down, snapped it over her face, gestured for Mitchell to do the same. His fingers fumbled with the straps. "Deploy masks," she said into the cabin intercom. Her voice was steady, almost bored. Behind them, yellow masks would be dropping from the ceiling like strange fruit, and flight attendants would be moving through the aisles with rehearsed calm. 447, your altitude is dropping. Confirm your situation." The voice on the radio was sharper now. "Engine 2 is dead. Engine 1 is compensating, but we're losing altitude. I need that vector, Reaper." Another pause. Ghost could almost hear the debate happening on the other end, the weighing of protocol against reality, the calculus of risk. Then, 447, vector heading 270, descend to flight level 250. You have clearance for emergency procedures. Ghost banked left, feeling the aircraft resist. The hydraulics were shot. She was flying a wounded bird, and the ocean below was no longer a distant abstraction. It was getting closer. Mitchell was on the backup radio, declaring emergency to civilian air traffic control, his voice cracking slightly on the word Mayday. She allowed herself one quick glance out the window. There, two silver specks against the blue, moving with impossible grace. The F-22s. They were close enough now that she could see the angles of their wings, the predatory sweep of their fuselages. Beautiful machines, flown by people who'd been where she'd been, who knew what it meant to hold lives in your hands at supersonic speed. One of them pulled alongside, close enough that she could see the pilot's helmet. He gave a slight nod, professional courtesy. Then his voice came over the guard frequency, the emergency channel every military and civilian aircraft monitored. "Ghost, is that you?" Mitchell looked at her. Did he just? She keyed the mic. "Reaper 11, confirm your last transmission." "I said, Ghost, is that you?" The voice had a hint of something else now. Recognition, maybe respect. "Captain Rourke." She felt something shift in her chest. The call sign, someone remembered. "Affirm, Reaper, it's Ghost, been a while." A beat of silence. Then, "Copy that, Ghost, we've got you. What's your status?" "Single engine, degraded hydraulics, 185 souls on board. I can keep her flying, but I need somewhere soft to put her down. Nearest suitable airport is Midway, bearing 090, 80 nautical miles, but you're losing altitude fast. You might not make it." The pilot's voice was calm, stating facts. "There's a carrier group 30 miles south, USS Roosevelt. They've got arresting gear." Mitchell's eyes went wide again. "You can't land a 767 on a carrier." Ghost didn't answer him. She was running calculations in her head. Airspeed, descent rate, distance. The math was ugly. Midway was possible, but tight, very tight. And if engine 1 failed, if anything else went wrong, they'd be swimming. The carrier, impossible by the book, but she'd done impossible before. "Reaper 11, advise Roosevelt we may need to attempt carrier landing. Request they prepare deck." Her voice was clinical, as if she'd asked for extra napkins. Mitchell made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "We don't have a tailhook. We don't have reinforced landing gear. This isn't." "I know what we don't have." Ghost's eyes were fixed on the instruments. Engine 1 was running hot. The EGT gauge was creeping toward red. They had minutes, maybe less. "But we have a flat deck and arresting cables. It's not ideal, but it's better than the water." The F-22 pilot came back on. "Roosevelt acknowledges. They're clearing deck and standing by. Ghost, I have to ask, can you actually do this?" She thought about the question. Thought about the weight of the aircraft beneath her, the people behind her, the ocean below. Thought about the years since she'd worn the uniform, since she'd felt the catapult throw of a carrier launch, since she'd greased a landing onto a deck that moved and pitched and tried to kill you. Different aircraft, different stakes, but the same sky. The same impossible ask. "I'll let you know in about 15 minutes, she said. The second F-22 pulled into view on her left side, flanking her. Two guardian angels in titanium and stealth coating. She could see the missiles under their wings, the radar domes, the sharp edges designed to slip through enemy detection like ghosts themselves. The irony wasn't lost on her. Mitchell was on the radio with the cabin crew. "Secure everything. Brace positions in 5 minutes. This is not a drill." His voice had steadied. Fear was giving way to focus. Good. She needed him sharp. Ghost toggled through the hydraulic system displays. Main system was dead. Backup was barely holding. The flight controls were heavy, mushy, fighting her inputs. Flying this thing was like trying to steer a school bus with flat tires, but she'd flown worse. Over Kandahar in 2019, she'd brought an F-16 home with half a wing missing and no hydraulics at all. They'd called it a miracle. She'd called it Tuesday. The ocean was close now. She could see the texture of the waves, the way the light played across the surface. Beautiful and indifferent. It would swallow them without malice, without memory. 447 Roosevelt Actual, a new voice said on the radio. This one had the weight of command. Captain, we're ready for you. Wind is 10 knots down the angle. Deck is clear, but I need you to understand we've never done this. No commercial aircraft has ever attempted carrier landing. Our cables are rated for fighters, not wide-bodies. This is uncharted territory. Understood, Roosevelt. Ghost's voice was steady. But uncharted is where I do my best work. A pause, then almost a chuckle. Then bring her home, Ghost, we'll catch you. She started the descent, dropping the nose by degrees, feeling the aircraft's reluctance. The altimeter spun backward, 20,000 feet. 15. The F-22s stayed with her, one on each wing like ceremonial escorts. Mitchell was breathing hard through his mask, but his hands were steady on the backup controls. When we get low, I need you to call out altitude and airspeed, Ghost said. Don't worry about anything else, just give me numbers. Copy. His voice was thin but determined. 10,000 feet. The carrier was visible now, a gray speck on the blue expanse. Too small, impossibly small. Ghost had landed on carriers hundreds of times, but always in an aircraft designed for it, with equipment made for the precise violence of a deck landing. This was different. This was a passenger jet with blown hydraulics, trying to thread a needle at 200 miles per hour. The descent continued, and Ghost's world narrowed to the instruments, the controls, the feel of the aircraft. She was aware of Mitchell beside her, of the passengers behind her, of the ocean below, but they were background now. What mattered was the dance, the constant negotiation between physics and will, between what the machine wanted to do and what she needed it to do. 5,000 feet, Mitchell called. Airspeed 220 knots. The carrier was growing, taking shape. She could see the deck, the island's superstructure, the tiny figures moving below. The Roosevelt was turning into the wind, presenting its angled deck. Standard procedure, but nothing about this was standard. One of the F-22 pilots spoke. Ghost, you're lined up well, approach looks good, but you're coming in heavy. Even if the cables hold, the deceleration is going to be violent. Make sure everyone's braced. Mitchell, final cabin announcement, Ghost said. He keyed the intercom. This is the cockpit. Emergency landing in 2 minutes. Brace positions now. Tighten your seatbelts. Secure all loose items. Stay in brace until we come to a complete stop. Flight attendants, prepare for impact. Ghost could imagine the scene behind them. The fear, the prayers, the mother holding her child, the businessman who'd been complaining about the Wi-Fi, the elderly couple on their anniversary trip, all of them now united in the terrible democracy of survival, where money and status meant nothing, where only the skill of the pilot and the mercy of physics mattered. 3,000 feet, 210 knots. The carrier was huge now, filling the windscreen. She could see the deck crew in their colored vests, the crash equipment standing by, the foam already deployed along the deck's edge. Someone down there was betting she'd miss, overshoot, undershoot. She couldn't blame them. Ghost dropped the landing gear. The indicators showed green, but the hydraulic pressure was almost gone. The gear was down and locked by gravity alone, one less variable. Engine 1 was screaming, temperature redlined, but still producing thrust. She needed every pound of it. 2,000 feet, 200 knots. The F-22s peeled off, giving her space. Their job was done. Now it was just her and the deck and the impossible task of stopping 80 tons of aircraft in less than 1,000 feet. Full flaps, Ghost said. Mitchell extended them manually, cranking the lever. The aircraft shuddered, slowed. The deck was rushing up, the angle perfect, the approach stable. She'd done this 1,000 times in her mind since the hydraulics had failed. Visualized every second, felt it in her bones. 1,000 feet, 190 knots. The carrier's deck was all she could see now. The white lines, the arresting cables stretched across the deck like tripwires, 4 of them. In a normal carrier landing, you aimed for the third wire. Too early and you risked a ramp strike. Too late and you missed them all, bolted off the deck into the ocean. But this wasn't a normal landing. She had no tailhook. The cables wouldn't catch her. The plan was simpler and more desperate. She put the main gear down just after the first cable, use every bit of brake she had, and pray the cables would tangle in the landing gear, create drag, slow them down before they ran out of deck. It was insane, but it was the only option left. 500 feet, 185 knots. Mitchell's voice was mechanical, rhythmic, a metronome in the chaos. Ghost's hands were light on the yoke. Too much input and the aircraft would overcorrect. Too little and they'd drift off centerline. The deck was narrow, only 200 feet wide. No margin for error. The wings of the 767 spanned over 150 feet, threading a needle while riding a wounded elephant. 400 feet, 180 knots. The altimeter was unwinding like a broken clock. The deck crew below were scrambling, getting clear. Protocol said they should be in safe zones, but some were staying close, ready to rush in the moment the aircraft stopped or crashed. Brave souls. She respected that. 300 feet, 175 knots. Engine 1 hiccuped. The EGT gauge spiked. Ghost felt her heart kick once hard. Not now, not yet. She needed 30 more seconds, just 30 seconds. The engine steadied, but she could hear the difference, the roughness in the tone. 200 feet, 170 knots. The waves below were individual now, each one distinct. She could see the foam, the way the water curled and broke. The carrier's wake was a white scar across the blue. The deck was massive and tiny at the same time, a postage stamp floating on an endless ocean. 100 feet, 165 knots. Mitchell's voice was shaking now. He couldn't help it. Ghosts was still calm. Hang with me, Mitchell, almost there. 50 feet, 160 knots. The deck filled the world. She could see the faces of the crew now looking up. The gray paint, the scorch marks from previous launches. The arresting cables, thick as her wrist, stretched taut, the foam glistening in the sun. 30 feet, 155 knots. She pulled back slightly on the yoke, flaring, bleeding off speed. The main gear was feet from the deck. Time stretched. She could feel every heartbeat, every breath. The weight of the aircraft, the trust of the passengers, the ghosts of every pilot who'd ever attempted something impossible. 20 feet. The deck was there, right there. She could almost touch it. The main gear kissed the deck just beyond the first cable with a shriek of rubber and metal. The aircraft bounced once, came down hard. The cables were under them, tangling in the gear struts, wrapping around the wheels. Ghost slammed on the brakes with everything she had. The deceleration was monstrous. The aircraft screamed. Metal tore. The cables caught, held, dragged. The nose gear came down with a crash that rang through the entire fuselage. People were screaming in the cabin. Overhead bins were bursting open. The brakes were smoking, glowing red-hot. The deck was disappearing beneath them at terrifying speed. 200 feet left. 100. The aircraft was slowing, but not enough. The end of the deck was coming, and beyond it, nothing but air and water. Ghost pulled the emergency brake bypass, dumping every ounce of hydraulic fluid left into the brake system. The wheels locked. The aircraft shuddered like a dying animal. The cables were stretched to their limit, fibers snapping but holding. 50 feet from the edge, the 767 stopped. For a moment there was only silence, the kind of silence that comes after thunder when the world takes a breath. Ghost's hands were still on the yoke, knuckles white. Mitchell was frozen beside her, eyes wide, mask askew. Behind them, the cabin was a chaos of crying and shouting and the sharp smell of fear. But they were stopped, on the deck, alive. Ghost keyed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the USS Roosevelt. Please remain seated until the crew gives the all clear." Her voice was steady, almost casual. And, sorry about the rough landing. It's been a while since I've done this. Mitchell let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled off his mask, his face slick with sweat. You did it. You actually did it. Ghost pulled off her own mask, ran a hand through her short dark hair. We did it, she corrected. You kept your head, that matters. Outside, the deck crew was already moving, rushing toward the aircraft with ladders and foam and emergency equipment. The F-22s were circling overhead, their contrails drawing circles in the sky like a benediction. The radio crackled with voices. Roosevelt Actual, the air boss, the F-22 pilots, civilian air traffic control, everyone talking at once, a chorus of disbelief and congratulation. Ghost ignored them all. She was running through the shutdown checklist, her fingers moving automatically. Fuel pumps off, electrical systems to standby, fire suppression armed. The machine was dead now or close to it, but she owed it the courtesy of a proper shutdown. It had carried them this far. It deserved respect. Mitchell was already opening the cockpit door. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Tors with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything, was there. Her uniform was disheveled, her face pale, but she was smiling. Everyone's okay, Captain. Some injuries, nothing critical. You did good. Ghost nodded. Get them off. Coordinate with the deck crew. Priority is the injured, then children, then everyone else. Standard evacuation protocol. Aye, aye, Captain. Tors said it with a grin, a naval term on a civilian aircraft. The absurdity of it all. She disappeared back into the cabin. Ghost stood, her legs unsteady. Adrenaline was fatting, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She stepped out of the cockpit and into the cabin. Passengers were unbuckling, standing, some crying, some laughing, some just staring into space. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, looked up at her with wide eyes. Are we on a boat? We're on a ship, Ghost said gently. A Navy ship, you're safe now. The girl smiled. That's cool. Ghost walked down the aisle, checking faces, making sure everyone could move. The cabin was a mess. Overhead bins open, bags everywhere, oxygen masks dangling like vines. But people were alive. Scared, shaken, but alive. That was what mattered. At the emergency exit, deck crew were setting up slides. The hatches opened and sunlight poured in, bright and clean. Ghost helped an elderly man to his feet, guided a mother with 2 children toward the exit. She could hear the Navy personnel outside, their voices professional and calm, directing passengers, organizing the chaos. Ghost was the last to leave the aircraft. Protocol. The captain goes down with the ship, or in this case, stays until everyone else is safe. She stood at the door, looking back at the cabin one last time. It looked like a battlefield, but everyone had walked away. That was a victory. She stepped out onto the deck of the USS Roosevelt. The air was salt and jet fuel and the particular smell of a carrier. Hot metal, sweat, purpose. Sailors were everywhere, some tending to passengers, some examining the aircraft, some just staring at the 767 sitting impossibly on their deck, cables wrapped around its landing gear like it had been caught in a net. A man in khakis and a captain's insignia approached. He was tall, graying, with the kind of face that had made hard decisions. Captain Rourke, I'm Captain Holly's, Roosevelt Actual, hell of a landing. Ghost shook his hand. Hell of a catch, Captain. Your crew did the impossible. So did you. Hollies looked at the aircraft, then back at her. When they told me you were Ghost, I didn't believe it. Thought you'd retired, thought you'd left the fight. I did retire, and I did leave. Ghost looked up at the sky, where the F-22s were still circling. But the fight has a way of finding you. Hollies nodded. I served with your squadron commander, Colonel Hastings. He told stories about you, said you were the best pilot he'd ever seen, said you could make an aircraft do things that violated physics. Ghost smiled, tired. Hastings liked to exaggerate. I just didn't like crashing. Well, you didn't crash today. You saved 185 lives. That's not exaggeration, that's fact. Hollis gestured toward the island. Come on, let's get you debriefed, get some food in you. You look like you could use a chair that isn't trying to kill you. They walked across the deck, weaving through equipment and personnel. Ghost noticed the sailors watching her, some with curiosity, some with something that looked like awe. Word was spreading. Ghost was back. The legend was real. She felt uncomfortable with it, the weight of reputation. She'd left the military to escape that weight, to be just another pilot. But maybe some things you couldn't escape. Maybe some things were written in your bones. In the island, they climbed stairs to the captain's briefing room. It was functional, utilitarian, maps on the walls, a large table, coffee that looked like it had been made during the previous watch. Hollis poured 2 cups, handed one to her. Sit, breathe, you've earned it. Ghost sat. The chair was hard and uncomfortable and perfect. She sipped the coffee. It was terrible. She didn't care. Mitchell appeared at the door, looking shell-shocked but intact. Hollis waved him in, poured him coffee too. Your co-pilot held together well, Hollis said to Ghost. That's good. Panic is contagious. Cool is too. He did great, Ghost agreed. Mitchell blushed, looked down at his coffee. First emergency landing. First anything, Mitchell admitted. I've been flying commercial for 2 years. Worst I've had before this was a bird strike on takeoff. This was... He couldn't find the words. Unforgettable, Hollis supplied. That's the word you're looking for. The debriefing took 2 hours. Ghost walked them through every decision, every system failure, every calculation. Hollis recorded it all, asked sharp questions, nodded at the answers. Mitchell filled in details from his perspective. Between them, they painted a picture of a dying aircraft and a pilot who refused to let it die completely. When it was done, Hollis leaned back in his chair. The NTSB will want to talk to you, FAA too, and probably a dozen news outlets. You just landed a commercial jet on a carrier. That's going to be a story. Ghost grimaced. I was hopping to avoid that. Good luck, Hollis said with a dry smile. You pulled off a miracle. People notice miracles. A knock at the door. A young ensign stuck his head in. Captain, the F-22 pilots are asking if they can speak with Captain Rourke. Hollis looked at Ghost. You up for it? She nodded. Yeah, they kept me honest up there. I owe them a thanks. The ensign led them to the flight deck observation room, a small space with windows overlooking the deck. 2 pilots in flight suits were waiting, helmets under their arms. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy confidence that came from flying the best fighter in the world. The other was shorter, compact, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Both had call signs on their name tags, Reaper and Blade. Reaper stepped forward, hand extended. Captain Rourke. Major Ethan Hunt, call sign Reaper. This is Captain Maria Vasquez, call sign Blade. It's an honor. Ghost shook their hands. The honor's mine. You gave me cover when I needed it. That mattered. We heard stories about Ghost, Blade said. Her voice was careful, measured. Thought they were just stories, bar talk, legends. Then Reaper recognized your voice and we looked up your record. You're the real deal. I was the real deal, Ghost corrected. Past tense. Now I'm just a cargo pilot with an eventful day. Reaper laughed. Cargo pilots don't land wide-bodies on carriers. That was combat flying. That was art. Ghost felt the weight of their respect, and it sat heavy. These were warriors, current and active, and they were looking at her like she was something special. It was uncomfortable and warming at the same time. She'd walked away from this world, but the world remembered her. What brought you to commercial flying? Blade asked. If you don't mind me asking. Ghost looked out the window at the deck, at the 767 sitting like a beached whale among the fighters and helicopters. I got tired of the fight, she said quietly. Tired of training for war. I wanted to fly something that didn't carry missiles. Wanted to take people places they wanted to go, not places they were ordered to go. Do you miss it? Reaper asked. The fight. Ghost thought about that. Thought about the adrenaline, the clarity, the purpose. Thought about the losses too, the friends who hadn't come home, the weight of command. Sometimes, she admitted. But what I did today, bringing everyone home safe, that's a better fight. That's the one worth winning. They talked for another hour. War stories, inevitably. Reaper and Blade shared tales from training exercises, from patrols over hostile territory. Ghost told them about flying over Afghanistan, about the night she'd been jumped by two enemy fighters and had managed to outmaneuver both, earning her call sign in the process. She'd gone silent on the radio, slipped into the dark, reappeared behind them like a phantom. Ghost. The name had stuck. "Why'd you leave?" Blade asked eventually. "With skills like yours, you could have made general, could have written your own ticket." Ghost was quiet for a moment. "I left because I was good at it," she said finally. "Good at killing, good at surviving, good at making hard calls. And I realized that the better I got, the more they'd use me. I'd never stop. I'd just keep flying until something finally got me, or until I became someone I didn't recognize." She looked at them. "I wanted to get out while I still remembered why I started flying in the first place. Because the sky is beautiful, because flight is freedom." Reaper nodded slowly. "I respect that, but the Air Force lost a hell of a pilot." "The Air Force has plenty of hell pilots," Ghost said with a half-smile. "Like you too, the sky's in good hands." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see media helicopters circling at a distance, kept back by the carrier's air defense perimeter but close enough to film. Ghost groaned. "So it begins." Hollies appeared at the door. "Captain Rourke, we're getting press requests, a lot of them. They want interviews, statements. What do you want me to tell them?" "Tell them no," Ghost said immediately. "Tell them I was just doing my job. Tell them to focus on the passengers, on the crew, on the Navy personnel who made this possible. Not me." "That's going to be hard," Holly said. "You're the story. Female veteran pilot lands commercial jet on carrier. It's got everything, drama, heroism, the underdog angle." "I'm not an underdog," Ghost said, irritation creeping into her voice. "And I'm not a story. I'm a pilot who had a bad day and got lucky." "You're more than that," Blade said quietly. "Whether you want to be or not, people need heroes, especially now. You showed them that impossible things can be done. That's worth something." Ghost wanted to argue, but she saw the truth in Blade's eyes. The younger pilot wasn't wrong. In a world full of bad news, maybe a story like this mattered. Maybe it gave people hope. She just wished it didn't have to be her story. "Fine," she said finally. "One interview, one statement, then I disappear." Hollies nodded. "I'll coordinate it. And for what it's worth, Captain, you handled this with grace. That matters too." After Hollies left, Ghost stood at the window, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The sky was turning gold and orange, the clouds lit from below like they were on fire. It was the kind of sky that reminded you why you flew. Not for the adrenaline or the glory, but for this, the simple, profound beauty of the world seen from above. The next few hours were a blur. Ghost gave her statement to a single reporter, a woman from a major network who asked decent questions and didn't sensationalize. Ghost kept it simple: mechanical failure, emergency procedures, team effort, grateful for the outcome. She deflected praise, shared credit, stayed humble. The reporter seemed frustrated, as if she'd expected Ghost to claim heroism, but Ghost didn't care. She'd said her piece. That was enough. The passengers were being transferred to support ships, then to land. Ghost made sure to speak with several of them to reassure them, to answer questions. The little girl who'd asked about the boat gave her a drawing, a picture of an airplane on a ship, with a stick figure labeled Captain Ghost. Ghost folded it carefully, tucked it into her pocket. That was worth more than any medal. Mitchell found her on the deck as the sun set. "They're flying us back to the mainland tomorrow," he said. "Back to reality. Back to paperwork and investigations and all the fun stuff." "Looking forward to it already," Ghost said dryly. Mitchell hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Why didn't you tell me about your background, about being Ghost?" Ghost watched the sun sink into the ocean. Because it doesn't matter. I'm not Ghost anymore. I'm just Alexis Rourke, commercial pilot. That part of my life is over. Is it though? Mitchell gestured at the carrier, at the 767, at the sky. Seems like it found you again. Maybe, Ghost admitted. But it doesn't define me. I'm more than what I was. We all are. Mitchell nodded. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were in that cockpit today. I don't think anyone else could have done what you did. You'd be surprised what people can do when they have to, Ghost said. You did great up there, Mitchell. Don't sell yourself short. He smiled, ducked his head. Thanks, Captain. As night fell, the carrier's deck transformed. Lights came on, painting everything in red and white. Aircraft were being moved, positioned for the next day's operations. The Navy never stopped, never rested. It was a machine of purpose and precision, and Ghost felt a pang of something that might have been nostalgia. She'd been part of this once. She'd lived this life. And while she'd left it behind, part of her would always belong to the sky, to the fight, to the impossible tasks that someone had to do. Reaper and Blade found her near the island. They're launching patrols tonight, Reaper said. Training exercise, want to watch? Ghost did. They climbed to the observation deck, stood in the dark as F-18s roared down the catapults, afterburners turning night into day for brief, brilliant moments. Each launch was a controlled explosion, a marriage of engineering and courage. The pilots were invisible inside their machines, but Ghost knew what they were feeling, the kick in the spine, the sudden acceleration, the transition from ship to sky in 3 seconds flat. It was violent and beautiful and addictive. Do you miss it? Reaper asked again, the truth this time. Ghost was quiet for a long moment. Every day, she said finally. But missing something doesn't mean you need to go back to it. Sometimes the best thing you can do is remember it was good and move forward. They flew Ghost and Mitchell back to Los Angeles the next morning. A Navy helicopter took them to a base on the California coast, where a commercial flight, heavily scrutinized and double-checked, carried them home. Ghost looked out the window the entire time, watching the landscape roll by below. Cities and farms and mountains and deserts. All the places people lived, worked, loved, fought. From up here it all looked peaceful. She knew better, but the illusion was nice. At LAX they were met by airline executives, lawyers, union representatives, and a small army of bureaucrats. Ghost answered questions, signed statements, agreed to medical evaluations. Mitchell handled it all with surprising aplomb, his earlier nervousness replaced by a kind of shell-shocked competence. They'd been through fire together. That created a bond. When it was finally over, when the last form was signed and the last question answered, Ghost stepped